Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc and Nick.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How you doing today, Nick?
I'm very excited to be here. How are you, Marc?
Also very excited. It's been a while since we have been at this, taking a break for our PhD and dissertation work. I'm happy to say that for both of us, it has been a successful journey and we're on the other side of it. And very excited for our guest today, who is Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, the professor of curriculum and instruction with a focus on literacy, language, and culture at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Muhammad has served as a classroom teacher, literacy specialist, school district administrator, curriculum director, and school board president. Dr. Muhammad's scholarship has appeared in leading academic journals and books. She's the author of the best-selling book, Cultivating Genius, an equity model for culturally and historically responsive literacy, and co-author of Black Girls Literacy, an edited volume. Her culturally and historically responsive education model has been adopted across thousands of schools across the United States and Canada. Her latest book, Unearthing Joy, is absolutely wonderful and a topic that I know Nick and I can't wait to dive into. Dr. Muhammad, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you all. And listen, all three of us made it to the other side from the dissertation and the PhD. So I remember that too.
Yeah, happy to be part of the club. I'll be perfectly honest. So just a couple of quick things, just my personal reactions to this really amazing book. In your acknowledgments, you referred to the Stevie Wonder song, "You're the Sunshine of My Life," which happens to be my wedding song. Oh. So already I knew I was in sync with you and this work on page one.
Yes.
And as someone who is currently having a book published right now, I thought the layout of your book was absolutely gorgeous. So can we start there? How did you come up with this design?
Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations on your upcoming book. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Thank you.
And second, I'm writing a book of joy. That's kind of where I started. I knew I was adding a fifth pursuit to the model from Cultivating Genius. So I knew the book would, be about all five of the pursuits of my culturally and historically responsive model with this emphasis on joy. And I just started writing. Like I always write, I start with the introduction first. I cannot start anywhere else in the writing until that introduction is tight. And so I'll spend most of my time writing like so many different introductions until it feels right, it fits with my vision. I always laugh and joke and say, if I can write a whole book of introductions, I will. It would like never end. It would just be introductions. And what I normally do when I write, I did this with my dissertation, at any writing project, I create a little soundtrack of music that will get me going. The music I need to start off with, and the hype music in the beginning, then the closing music. I mean, I have a whole like design around my soundtracks for writing. And this was like, no other piece of writing. I had my songs in the background. And I said, well, maybe readers want music in the background when they're reading. And I actually took the soundtracks or the songs I listened to and put it across the introduction. So first it was just going to be the introduction with a QR code with a playlist of songs. Then I said, okay, as I'm writing the other chapters, it became something across all the chapters. And I had that idea of making the book sort of feel like an embodiment of joy. I tell my doctoral students that when you write about a certain topic, it should embody that topic in your writing. So I have students who might write about art education, but their writing is so static and linear. I said it should feel artistic, right? So I open each chapter with poetry because artists, particularly poets, help us to understand very complex topics. So after that, I thought, well, why not artwork? Because art, we wanted to make sure we have the visuals that sort of went along with the cover. The artist who did the cover, she did an amazing job. And I said, well, why don't I have some kind of vision around each chapter? So each chapter became layered text as I write about, layered with artwork, poetry, music, playlists, coloring book pages, and and like primary source documents and things like that. I wanted it to feel like an embodiment of joy as they were reading. And I wanted teachers to feel like artists as they think about curriculum, because what this book is really about is curriculum design. And how do we see our curriculum as our canvas, as our artwork? And so I wanted all that to come across. And it just came. I mean, sometimes you can't even explain how you bring ideas together. It's just one day it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's try it. And I never seen a book really like it. The academics book, the professional books, I didn't really see it interactive in that way.
So I will say thank you so much for writing this book. I was tremendously engaged and inspired enormously by reading it. I think the first reaction I had, is I wish every policymaker and superintendent in the country would read this book first.
Wow.
Because I feel, and I don't say that lightly, because here's my real question for you. I feel like we've made an overcorrection of school being exclusively about skill development. So I think when Marc and I were in school, it was really about content. And now people are worried that we're bombarding kids with too much content, so let's make everything about skills. And let's just throw a social and emotional day in there.
Yes.
What you've done, which I said has inspired me so much, is you've explained that we have to do both together simultaneously, continuously. So I think first my question really is, why do you think we have so many people that don't understand the importance of looking at the whole child throughout the curriculum, throughout the year?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people, they don't know what they haven't experienced or seen. And so they don't really see this as a possibility, because I was educated with skills only or content only. They may say that to themselves. Test prep. I mean, that's what people know. If we think about the skills only curriculum, how we teach, measure, assess only skills, we've been doing that since the 1600s in this country, around the inception of the first public school. And we've had pivots a little bit with knowledge building, content building, project-based learning, multiple intelligences. I mean, it's all kind of stuff that came through education, but we still stuck to basically skills only. And like you're saying, those two go hand in hand. You can't access the content or the knowledge unless you have the skills. And what's the point of teaching skills if you don't contextualize it in content or knowledge? So what I tried to do is bring all these together. But to go back to your question, a lot of people, they don't know what they haven't seen. We can talk about it, but they have to see it and experience it and look at children and learn that way themselves. I think, education is linked to a lot of capitalism in terms of making money off of students' failure. I mean, curriculum costs so much. And, if we continue to teach in skills only, where we're only measuring skills, that continues the industries of assessments and of curriculum in textbooks in that way. And we know that there's other capitalistic endeavors connected to failure of some children, right? How some students have opportunities and some don't. And we've all heard and read about how prisons are choosing numbers of bids and sort of predicting things based on reading scores at a very early age. So I think folks are not, they don't want it due to other goals that they may have that might be capitalism or others. And then also because they don't really know what it looks like. When you talk about joy, they look at me like, we can't measure joy. We can't teach joy. How are they going to get into college? How are they going to pass the test?
Right.
And I'm like, are they passing the test now?
You're so right.
You know?
And you can't accomplish any of these things until you're able to reach kids in a way that makes them feel happy and supported and nurtured and cared for. And what I loved again about the book is that you lay it out in a way where you could accomplish those things and still teach them the curriculum. That's what, so I really have to say you've done miraculous work here in that regard. I'll just let you know that I read the book just prior to teaching the AP African American pilot course.
Oh.
Yes, yeah, exactly. My reaction. So I will thank you.
That's a good primer for that course.
You couldn't have been better timed in your publication, because I think you really helped me. I'm sure you're aware of all the political controversy regarding the course in Florida and Arkansas not allowing the students to take it. We've had a really nice experience, and I will commend you and thank you, because I think you allowed me to approach the course with the necessary rigor, but also with the support that the students needed, because there was a lot of difficult history that they've had to learn. And you don't shy away from that in the book. You do say, we can learn about the tragedies of Black Wall Street and still do it in a way where students feel, a sense of support.
Yeah. And learn the joy of the people. Like,
Right.
nobody's history started with oppression.
Right.
And sometimes we teach oppressive histories as if that's their only story, their single story. And I had to learn that even when I teach about enslavement or the Holocaust or genocide, anything that happened in the world, do not start the story there. Where you start the story really matters, and teach how that group of people practice self-love and joy and togetherness and collectivism, before that happened, and even during their oppressive state too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, it was a great way for me to enter the course after having read your book first.
Oh, wonderful.
Can you take us through the Hill model and a little bit into how it was developed?
Sure. So I was in graduate school, and I knew we remember that time, although we try to block out some of it.
All of it.
And it was like my last class, and I actually tried to advocate with other students not to take this class. It was my advisor's class, so I felt like I had to take it. It was a special seminar, but I was like at the end of it. I was in my angry phase of graduate school where I didn't want to take another course. But it was in this course, it ended up making, so my trying to talk everybody out of enrolling in the course didn't work. And I'm grateful it didn't work, because I started to research in this class Black literary societies. I was really interested in collaborative literacy spaces, learning spaces historically. And I came upon the work of Dr. Elizabeth McHenry, who wrote this book called Forgotten Readers. So it's like a bit of a definitive history of Black literary society members. And I started to go deep into the archives. I was around the country. I was in my local city. I was in reading rooms, microfiche. You all remember microfiche?
Absolutely.
I was finding mostly 19th century historical artifacts, newspapers, pamphlets, book reports, all sorts of things. They kept meeting notes of these literary societies. And every time I would read, I would think, wow, they gathered to learn to develop their identity. So I would put all these different artifacts under identity. I started to code the historical data in that way. And then I found, they really spoke of skills and standards. It was almost like the Common Core. They would use the same language you see in the Common Core back in the 1800s. And so with identity, they really wanted to learn who they were. Like, they wanted to have a strong sense of self, their collective identity, but they also learned about diverse cultures around the world. Chinese, Ethiopian cultures. I mean, I would see that their learning of identity did not just stay within themselves. And with skills, of course, they were learning what we now call state learning standards and things like that. The third thing I found was intellect. It started off as knowledge. They were building knowledge, but it wasn't like knowledge. They were doing some social action with their knowledge. I found that, knowledge sort of stays in your mind, and intellect is when you do something with it. So they were doing something with their knowledge and not just taking a test, right? So that became the third goal in the model. And they were learning about new people, places, and things, and concepts, and things like that. The fourth goal was criticality. Now, it wasn't originally criticality. I coded it different things. It was social justice, print authority. They wanted to have authority of what they were reading and writing. But it became criticality to be sort of this all-inclusive goal of teaching social justice, equity, anti-oppression. And then the fifth goal that the ancestors had, which I added right with the last book, is joy. And I found that they didn't just define joy as having fun or happiness only. It was healing. It was wellness. It was a sense of safety. It was collaboration and putting your voices at the center. You know, joy was like a sense of peace. Like I feel so peaceful and safe that I can be myself. I can live out my fullest academic potential, right? So joy was not this thing of just going around smiling at every time, but it was like this sustained peace and happiness. And they called, and that became the model. I started to practice with it. I mean, this was like 14 years ago. Wow. I began to practice with it. And I said, wow, this is making me a better teacher and a better educator and leader. And I said, maybe this could help other teachers. And that's when I began to really write about it. And what was really unique about these 5 things is that they named them pursuits. They named all their educational goals and endeavors pursuits. They did not name them standards. They did not name them goals. They named them such a powerful word that was meaningful, that kind of carried with them in throughout their lives, not just school.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just ask you, do you think one of the obstacles to implementing, all the suggestions, is it possible that there are too many teachers that themselves are in need of more joy, and that because they're maybe beaten down by the system so much that they're not able to let go of those challenges, and they make their classroom just not as, I hate to say fun, but I think you know what I mean, as engaging as it could be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like you can't give something you don't have. I mean, can I really teach with joy if I have no joy myself, or my joy is deflated? Can I really teach writing skills if I hate writing? I mean, I meet teachers who say, I hate writing, and they teach writing. And or some elementary school teachers that struggle a little bit with mathematics, and they teach mathematics. So what I help teachers to do is to go through the self-reflection of all 5. Who are you? Do you know who you are? How do you feel about your sense of self? You don't have to be perfectly, you don't have to arrive at all of these different 5 pursuits, but you have to be on the journey of them with your students. And you can learn joy as you are engaging, creating spaces for joy. It might be joyful for the teacher too. So I want teachers to be at a point of doing the work first, but at the same time, continue to cultivate and work on these 5 things with your students, because it's not only your students that will benefit, but it's you. But of course, everything you said, it's hard to teach something. It's hard to even create a space for intellectualism if you don't read and cultivate your own genius, right? So it is about that. And I got to tell you, going back to your other question, Nick, when teachers who say this is too much or we can't teach it, when they teach all 5 pursuits together across the unit plan, they find that students who struggled or were disengaged with those skills, joy is their access, identity, criticality is their access. So it's not only increasing achievement and engagement for students, but also for the teacher. And it's helping them to see possibility too.
Yeah, and I love that answer. And I think, so I initially said to you, I feel like your book should be read by every policymaker, because I guess my point is a lot of teachers are being bogged down by unnecessary work.
Yeah.
So, and I look at your book, and first of all, it applies to K through 12. So it applies to every grade level. And I would rather a teacher construct lesson plans with this mindset than with some random standard that somebody in the state capitol put together that nobody's ever going to look at again. But because somebody's requiring them to identify standard 2.7A in, whereas your book is truly challenging teachers to say, how can I create a lesson that's going to teach them content, teach them skill, and do it with the love of learning.
With every bit of rigor.
Yeah, with every bit of rigor.
We don't sacrifice the
Right.
rigor, but they're also bogged down with frameworks. It's a new one every year. And I tell some principals, you got to put these frameworks together because it feels too isolated.
Right.
You know, in a dream world, if we deep dream, freedom dream, teachers really should not teach the whole day. I don't think that's what we would ask any genius or intellectual to do. We would give them more time to plan, to think, to read. You know, I think we have structured education in a way that does not really honor, that doesn't really help to cultivate genius and joy by these schedules. So I do understand that, you know, when teachers tell me, I don't have the time, I don't even have time to go to the bathroom, to drink water.
Right.
They're right. I listen to them. And so I'm always trying to navigate, this is where we are right now. How do I lift some of this or help you through some of this as we try to bring these 5 pursuits up in the class?
Obviously, equity is a huge theme in your book. To which of the following do you attribute the lack of equity in the school system? Is it a lack of racial literacy, a lack of courage on behalf of educators to have potentially difficult conversations? Is it a lack of empathy? What do you think?
Well, I think we've defined equity wrong. We have mainly focused on equity as access and equity as multicultural representation, right? Those are aspects of equity for sure, but that shouldn't be the 2 central reasons of how we define equity. We really should have been defining equity as anti-oppression and anti-racism. And I start with anti-racism because we have the history we have in this country. And we are so fixated on, you know, saying things, well, let's not make children feel bad for people who look like them. Why? I mean, somebody could rob the store right down the street, have the same hoop earrings I wear, the same look. I don't feel bad. Guess what? Because I didn't do it. So we've become fixated on like this idea of like guilt and not telling the truth and hiding it so it makes us look better instead of saying, listen, this is where we are. This is the history. How can we be better for each other? How can we have how can we tell the truth and have a new identity as a nation? That really didn't happen. So it was a lot of, you know, and I have historical artifacts to prove it. It was a lot of erasure. It was a lot of falsehood. It was a lot of like half truths, not telling the complete picture. And then we sort of ended up with, well, if we give children more access as equity, well, what if I'm giving them more access to something that's harmful?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. And then if we provide more books with people of color, that's enough. What if you're not teaching them wholly or completely, you know, or in ways that helps to also elevate consciousness and all these other things. So I think that's where we got it wrong. We've been so afraid and we have been so unempathetic for people who are hurting. You know, I say, to me, equity is like seeing all of humanity as one body. And if one arm is hurt or oppressed, you feel it in your other body, right? So if it is children with IEPs, if it's Black lives, if it's immigrants, you look at all of humanity as your body. And we have never done that. That's what equity is. And that metaphor doesn't come from me. That comes from a poet named the Golestan of Sadi. He wrote that in the year of 1258. Look, we still don't have a clear sense of what equity is. So it's not like we're short of literature, poets, and scholarship to teach us, but some people, they struggle with that empathy and love for other people. So the problem, the central problem is a lack of love.
And your answer really makes me remember one of my favorite lines of the book, which I wrote down. How can we water an earth that systemic racism and oppression have made dry? And the way you just, phrase your response to the question really, I feel like it really captures that line in so many different ways. And it really was so beautifully written. And I just wanted to point out the fact that I really love that line tremendously.
Thank you.
And the comments that really resonated with me there, when you're talking about, what good is access if we're setting them up for failure, And that's because of the standards we've set up. So everything, Mark and I are on the high school level, and the shift has been overwhelmingly to reading skills, reading and analysis. But if the student struggles to read at an early age, we can give them all the access we want, but it's very difficult to overcome that. And that's been my biggest concern. And it has to do with our state exams as well as the AP exams. Everything is so much based on reading that you'll have a kid in there. And guess what? If you're only basing the class on that exam, it's going to be tough to get them to love what they're doing because they're banging their head up against the wall. I'm just not even a question. Just I appreciate that you bring that up because access is not good enough alone.
Yeah. If you give a kiddo who's struggling to read print more books, that's not necessarily, right? Yep.
And I was going to ask you, if you've been familiar or following some of the changes that are going on in the Houston public school system, which has been basically taken over, and overwhelmingly, the teachers are being forced to do, we're from New York, but the teachers are being forced to do everything based on a script. And so for example, the first day of school, day 1, minute 1, straight learning right away. No, how was your summer? No, get to know people activities. No. And again, I'm not there, so I can't speak from personal experience, but a lot of the articles I've been reading is just talking about how teachers, every minute of their lesson is basically scripted. Wow. And that's completely, antithetical to what
And what is it going to do for anybody? It's not going to be it's not going to do anything positive for the child or the teacher. Nobody goes into education to read a script. Right. I hope not, right? And my question is who's writing this? I'm always trying to get to the root of the folks behind the scenes, like the curriculum or the content writers. And, I find that a lot of them have never been teachers or they haven't been, they come from psychology or those kind of backgrounds, or cognitive science. They have not, even some of the stuff they put in one class day, like 55, 45 minutes. I'm like, teachers can't do all this. And I ask when I meet them, I'm like, have you ever been a teacher? Have you successfully been a teacher in these different areas with diverse children? So just being a teacher is not enough. All we do is put fresh coats of paint on the same thing. And we call it something new. I'm sure in Houston, they're calling it something new, some kind of new initiative. We tried scripted education. We tried, it's just like when balanced literacy goes to advanced literacy, science and reading. Underneath it all, underneath that new, fresh, pretty paint, is the same thing that didn't work the first time. And it's funny because now some states and some people are saying, let's talk about longer school days. Okay, we tried that before too. Well, it's just wasting time. And it's sad because the people who are, right at the center of it is our children. Mm-hmm. And my whole idea, you all, is we tried all that. Why not try joy and identity and critical? Why not just try, if our scores look the same of how they looked in the 90s or 70s, I was reading articles that our reading scores are not really moving. What else do we have to lose? Why not? There's no way you can tell me that, adding these 5 pursuits on will take us back or keep us where we are. We have nothing to lose. So I wish Houston and other folks, when they want to try these new initiatives, they come away from the 1600s a bit.
And to that end, you asked the question in your book, shouldn't everything be called the humanities?
Yeah. Why is it just social studies and ELA? Because what I started to notice is math teachers wanted solutions. And I'm like, I don't have the solutions. I didn't teach math. I'm not there yet. And so they would tell me, and some science teachers, but mostly math teachers will tell me, well, how do I teach this concept in the context of culturally responsiveness, I said, well, I begin to have the guiding questions because they're the expert, not me. And I said, well, how would you use this type of mathematics in the world? And if they say, I don't know, I would say, why are you teaching it then? Because sometimes they would say, I don't know. So I was pushing them to be scholars, mathematics scholars. You are scholars of your discipline, right? Because what ended up happening is that social studies, I also come from social studies, social studies were kind of neglected. I mean, sometimes there's reading, there's math initiatives, and I feel like art and social studies people are neglected in some of the PD and opportunities because it's never really tested. So it hasn't been the focus. But I said, well, why don't we make all the content social studies? I'll kind of sneak it in with these 5 pursuits. And what ended up happening, we were historicizing topics. We were making everything contextualized to the world. It became humanities-based, science, social studies, PE even. And doesn't that make sense? Because if the goal of schools, which according to me, it should be to improve and advance the state of humanity. They all should be humanities subjects.
And to that end, putting a joy standard in the lesson plan, which is a suggestion that you make, is a perfect idea and a perfect way to help achieve that outcome.
Yep. And I didn't have it in there because I just thought everybody was just doing joy. I mean, I show up. And listen, with my undergraduates, it's funny watching me teach because they show sometimes no expression. I'm just there with my joy in front of the class, like you will not take it away. But, I made it like a more formal pursuit because I think that made the point that we should actually make it as a part of one of our objectives for learning. I think a lot of people just weren't really thinking it that way. And even making it a 5th pursuit, people were like, yeah, I need to take joy seriously just as much as I take skills seriously. And why not? Look at you as an adult. You take joy very serious, your happiness, your mental health, all of that, your peace. We take joy seriously as adults, but why can't we start it early with children?
And what's so funny, as you're saying that, I'm thinking when people take a mental health day, they don't come to school. Why can't we have a situation where your mental health day, where you're feeling joy, is in school? Why do we have to escape the learning environment in order to find or carve out space for joy? It just doesn't make any sense.
That's a beautiful line. You should put that in your book. Why do we have to stop coming somewhere to focus on our mental health? Why can't we focus on our mental health where we are? That's a beautiful line.
I'll split it with you.
Okay. And co-author next book.
But if you think we should, so where do you think we should direct most of our energy to try to make the shift that you're articulating? Do you think it should be on the college level with, potentially new teachers? Do you think it needs to go directly to the local school districts? Should it be a nationwide emphasis?
It has to be policy. I've been asking myself this question, so I started in the classroom. Let's start in the classroom, right? We're making immediate change there with the curriculum. The curriculum, that's why people are trying to ban and change curriculum because they know its power. So I started with the curriculum, but then we had some school districts and folks saying, but you got to go back to the scripted lesson, but you can't teach that. You can't teach in that way. Right. So then I moved my energies to teacher education programs. Okay, we're preparing the next generation of teachers to know this and teach in this way. But then guess what? They enter the schools and say, like in Houston, I don't care what you learned about Gholdy Muhammad or Gloria Lasting-Billings and all these other folks. You have to teach this scripted lesson. So they have all this greatness from their teacher prep program that they can't even implement and use. Okay. So then I said, well, why are so many people creating policies against this work? It's because we've never had policies for it. If you notice, across school districts, we have professional development. We have, checklists. We did this. We order more multicultural books, but we do not have policy oftentimes around anti-oppression, criticality, anti-racism, or culturally responsive education. And we'll have the handbooks, we'll suggest it, but we do not mandate it. And this is how I know we don't mandate it. It's not in the teacher evaluation. The unions don't really, put this as top of their agenda sometimes too. So policy, in my opinion, is where we should go if we want to be serious about this, because then what happens once we have the policy, then we have, and the state mandates and things like that, then we'll have teacher ed programs follow suit because they know that now we have a new set of policy and standards to meet. Then we'll have a change in teacher evaluations, right? Maybe assessments, maybe curriculum. So I think we have to go, I'm always trying to work across the curriculum to the policy and then the policy to the curriculum at the same time. But I really hope we have people that move toward policy, including myself.
Great answer. I also personally just, rather than test scores, I just like the eye test. You can talk to students. Yeah. And by the time they're seniors, you can see, are they ready for the world? Are they knowledgeable? Are they curious? Are they passionate? Are they social? Are they energetic, enthusiastic? Or are they beaten down so badly by what we've done? And I think that's the indictment on our system. And by the way, I think my sadness is some of the students who I'm concerned about, they are scoring on the exams. The exams don't necessarily indicate whether or not they're so kids are not data points. They're human beings. And
oh my gosh. Yes. And I learned that when I started training teachers at like boarding schools and private schools, the children weren't struggling with academics. They came in at a college level in some of these. But what we would find is that they had a low sense of self. They didn't know about other cultures. They had a low joy. They put all this pressure on themselves, and what you're saying is going back to this idea of mental health. We're also seeing an increase in depression, suicide amongst the young people, shootings amongst the young people. I mean, a lot of these school shooters have been a student in the district and they're still very young. So, we have to pivot. It's time, our students are not well and academics are not enough for them.
Yeah. And nor is one random day devoted to let's all be happy to. It's like I remember when I was in college and they made me analyze it was a long time ago, and they made me analyze a textbook for its multicultural perspective. And the textbook basically was 500 pages of white men history, and then in each chapter would be one page, makers in history, African Americans. Then the next chapter would be makers of history, women. But it'd be like one page dedicated to
shoehorned in.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. We can't, and that's what I just keep getting from this brilliant book. We can't just say, on one Friday every month, everybody's going to do something nice to each other. It's got to be completely ingrained throughout the curriculum. And Mark and I have been around for a long time. We really haven't encountered anybody who has done it as well as you in this book. I mean, this really is, it needs to be required reading because it really is that powerful.
Well, I'm going to take you all on the road and we can advocate the way you're talking. No, thank you for that. And what you said about that one page, one day is real. Yeah. It's not enough.
No, it's not enough for anyone. So.
No.
But my last question, Dr. Muhammad, there's so much research in this book, and I'm just curious, where do you go to explore and unearth so many of these previously untold or hardly told stories and texts, and kind of what inspires you to go there and research them?
Well, one of my mothers is a historian, and she says everything can be explained through history. If you don't know what to do, you can go in history and find a solution, an answer. Like when people say, well, how do we get people who don't want this work or don't want this mindset? I say, what did the ancestors do? It's already been done. They've already laid out the roadmap of what we should do in these kinds of situations. So first of all, I know the special qualities and the beauty of history. That's always, I love social studies. I love history. And you could tell because as a kid, I wrote a letter to myself almost every year of my life. I didn't know this until 2 weeks ago, until I found these boxes.
Oh my God.
Can you believe that? I completely forgot. And I would write a letter. It was like I knew the importance of archiving since a kid.
Wow.
And so it's something that's always been inside of me, but it was just reading that first archive, that first historical document. It was just fascinating and energizing. Like reading is like I was like falling in love with the language, with the people at that time. And to have that much love and grace and sincerity in your heart when other people are treating you and doing your people this way, it was like it's a special group of people. And those are the people you learn from.
Mm.
Anytime you're in the presence, even if it's a newspaper I'm reading, I'm still in the presence of them. Or if you're in the physical presence of somebody, that's the people you learn from. Those are your guides, your North Stars, right? And so all I needed was just one read of an artifact to just be excited by it and hope that I can bring that out. That became sort of my niche as a researcher and scholar. Like, what happens if I can take history, a part that has been underexplored or not well known, and bring it and make connections to the contemporary life of teachers? And so it's worked. And I want to keep doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. I really look forward to the future work that you're able to produce because you're making such a significant impact on the lives of so many students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for sharing your time and sharing your genius with us through your words and through your responses and everything else. We truly appreciate you taking some time out with us today.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Your questions are amazing. I feel like I can talk to you all day. We'll have a part 2, though. I'm sure.
Oh, that's great.
Well, anytime.
Maybe with your book, I'll take your seat and we'll interview you.
Thank you so much. You were the perfect guest to get us back into the groove of our podcast. So,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah, great job. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to catch up on previous episodes of State of Ed Podcast, you can find us at stateofedpodcast.com. We hope you'll also pick up a copy of Dr. Muhammad's book. You could also pick up a copy of Forward Fast, Making Sense of Education in an Era of Rapid Change, wherever books are sold. And I'm also very excited to announce the upcoming release of my new book, Captivate, which will be arriving this summer on Codebreaker Books. Big thanks again to Dr. Muhammad for joining us on this return episode. Have a good one.